Well, here we go again. High Holy Days, Part 3, Take 3. I was assured that my first uh, two takes were actually being broadcast. Thank you very much. From friends in Scotland wrote that they were seeing me. But now it actually is acting normally here. So I'll start one more time. Uh, it's March 18th, which is kind of a important day in the high holy days of Thelema. It's not a feast day or anything like that, but it's pretty important. We'll get to that. It's also holy, or is it Holai, the Hindu spring festival, where people throw colorful powder in your face and expect you to be happy about it. But it's as long as I guess it's good to wear masks and not breathe all of that in. But it's a joyous affair, and it's like the spring festival where you really cut loose. So cut loose and just go throw some colored powder in the stranger's face today, and say Happy Holy Day. But also, March 18th is a day that is observed. I wouldn't say celebrated, because it's sort of a mournful day, because this is the day in 1314 when Jacques DeMolay was burned at the stake right out front of right out front of Notre Dame. Okay, and it was it's a date that is associated with revenge against superstition, tyranny, and oppression. And before I go on to the Thelemic thing today, I just wanted to share what I wrote a number of years ago in my book, The Key to Solomon's Key. Is this the lost symbol of Masonry? Because there's a Masonic youth group called the Order of DeMolay, and I was a charter member of the Columbus, Nebraska chapter way back. I probably joined in 1961 or something like that. When the oath of a DeMolay, I'm going to share that with you. I promise that I'll be faithful to every trust committed to me, to every promise that I shall make so far as humanly possible, and that I will hold ever before me the glorious example, the heroic fidelity of Jacques DeMolay, and that of every other martyr who gave his life rather than betray a friend or be false to a trust. When I was 14 years old, I was gently pressured by my father and several other my schoolmates to join the Order of DeMolay, created in 1919 by Frank S. Land, a Kansas City businessman and a high-degree Freemason. DeMolay is a Masonic organization for young men between the ages of 12 and 21. At first, I thought the whole thing was a little corny and would much prefer to have spent my time practicing my guitar and misbehaving. I confess I didn't take much of it seriously. There were, however, certain elements of the experience that appealed to me very much. And I'm going to skip way ahead to this section here. I was particularly impressed with DeMolay's second-degree initiation ceremony. The ritual is really a play staged in the chapter room by the boys themselves. It exemplifies the trial and martyrdom in 1314 of Jacques DeMolay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who was burned at the stake in Paris at the hands of the Inquisition. They don't go into too much details of what Inquisition it was, but anyway, it's a remarkably elaborate drama full of offstage torture and screaming, just the kind of thing adolescent boys enjoy. In a way, the ceremony is a diluted preview of elements of several degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry that treat on the same subject. As presented, the story is a classic example of good versus evil. The noble Grand Master of a band of virtuous knights resisting an envious and greedy King of France and a corrupt and superstitious Pope. Even though in this case evil temporarily triumphs, DeMolay is executed and his order apparently destroyed, the moral lessons are clear. Our hero remains true to his conscience and loyal to his comrades throughout the ordeals of false accusations, torture, an unjust trial, and finally the stake. The ceremony didn't focus too clearly about what precisely the charges against the Templars and DeMolay were. In the ritual, the Master Inquisitor accuses DeMolay of being the head of an order that, quote, practiced many abominations, and charged him with hypocrisy and treachery in conducting the Crusades in the Holy Land, betraying the King of France, Philippe IV the Bel, heresy toward the Church, and this is my favorite, how dare they, living in wealth while the poor starved. The church never did that. How dare they? Okay. Conniving with the infidel to make the Crusades fail of their holy purpose. I have to admit I was pretty awed by the whole thing. In my adolescence, Jacques DeMolay, seemed like a pretty cool guy, and his death was an object lesson in virtue and loyalty, qualities I hoped I'd always be able to emulate. But besides teach me what I was for, DeMolay's story also taught me about things I should be against. The forces of intolerance, superstition, and tyranny. And if you would like to read more about my thoughts about that, and you don't already have this wonderful book, it's one of Constance's favorite books. It might be her favorite book, and it's published by CCC. My good friend Brad Olson is the publisher. Okay. Let's see, I don't know which one of these I'm going to read first because we're actually taking the events as they occurred with Crowley and Rose in Cairo in 1904, in March of 1904, and what they were going through. Crowley actually tried to show her the sylphs and performed the preliminary invocation of the Goetia several times to get her to see the sylphs, but instead of seeing the sylphs, she kind of, watching the ceremony sort of put her into a trance. So, and in that trance, she sort of spookily said that the gods of Egypt, one in particular, were waiting for Crowley. So I'm going to back up. This is from Crowley's own autohagiography, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley. March 17th, we read this yesterday, but I'm just going to back up a little. March 17th, I don't remember whether I repeated my attempt to show her the sylphs, but probably did. It's my character to persist. She again got into the same state and repeated her remarks, adding, "It's all about the child," and "all Osiris." I think I must have been annoyed by her contumacy. Perhaps for this reason I invoke Thoth, the god of wisdom, presumably by the invocation printed in Liber Israfel. That's the preliminary invocation. Which I knew by heart. Oh, actually, it's not the preliminary invocation. It's the invocation of Thoth, which I knew by heart. Okay, I may have been subconsciously wondering whether there or not there was something in her remarks and wanted to be enlightened. The record said, and I'll read direct from that thing in a moment. The record said, "Thoth invoked with great success indwells us." But this strikes me to some extent written up in a spirit of complacency, if not arrogance. I remember nothing of any result, he says. Okay, now, today. And it just so happens that this year, the days of the week match up. March 17th was a Thursday, so on Friday, March 18th. Possibly I repeated the invocation. The record said, revealed, quote, "revealed that the waiter was Horus, whom I had offended and ought to invoke." Waiter, the quote, waiter sounds like a sneer. I thought it was sheer impudence of Urata to offer independent remarks. That's a chauvinistic thing for Crowley to say. But we could never accuse him of being a man of his day. I wanted to show her the sylphs. I must have been impressed by one point. How did Urata know that I offended Horus? The troubles of Mathers, his fight in the Golden Dawn with Mathers, were due to his excessive devotion to Mars, who represented one side of the personality of Horus, and no doubt I was inclined to err in the opposite direction, to neglect and dislike Mars as a personification of unintelligent violence. But was her bullseye a fluke? Her mention of Horus gave me a chance to cross-examine her. How do you know that it's Horus who's telling you all this? Identify him. Urata knew less Egyptology than 99 Carene tourists out of 100 Carene tourists of Cairo. Her answers were overwhelming. The odds against her being right were 1 in many million. I allowed her to go on. She instructed me how to invoke Horus. Rose instructed him how to invoke Horus. The instructions were, from my point of view, pure rubbish. I suggested amending them. She emphatically refused to allow a single detail to be altered. She promised success, whatever that might mean. On Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure, we can't hear you, dear. But would you like to share?
Oh, absolutely not. Excuse me, I apologize. I was just in my own Idaho.
Okay.
Or hell, whatever you want to talk about.
Constance's Idaho is just right next. Okay. She promised success, whatever that might be, on Saturday or Sunday, tomorrow or Sunday. If I had any aspiration left, it was to attain samadhi, which I had not yet ever done. She promised that I should do so. I agreed to carry out her instructions, avowedly in order to show her that nothing could happen if you broke all the rules. On some day before March 23rd, and I'm assuming it might still be today, the 18th, Urada identified the particular god with whom she was in communication from the Stele in the Bulak Museum, which we had never visited. It's not, and that, of course. Oh, and I posted a beautiful, beautiful painting of the event, of her identifying it on my page. But there it is, right there. Okay. It's not the ordinary form of Horus, but Rahur Kuit. Okay. There he is there. He's the one with the solar disk on his head and a Uraeus serpent like that. Not every Horus has that. Usually Horus is just kind of that hawk there, or Horus without a hat, or sometimes Horus with the crown of both Egypts. It's not the ordinary form of Horus, but Rahur Kuit. I was, no doubt, very much struck by the coincidence that the exhibit, a quite obscure and undistinguished stele, bore the catalog number 666. But I dismissed it as an obvious coincidence. Okay, the next paragraph starts with March 19th. We'll pick it up from here tomorrow. But today I want to, redundant as it may be, read what it says about the 18th here in the Equinox of the Gods. And this is from Crowley's The Book of Results, his own diaries. The 18th revealed that the waiter was Horus, whom I had offended and ought to invoke. The ritual revealed in skeleton promises Saturday or Sunday, and of samadhi. In parentheses, it says, this waiter, another sneer, we are uncertain. The revealing of the ritual by W. the Seer, by Rose, consisted chiefly in a prohibition of all formula hitherto used, as will be seen from the printed text below. It was probably on this day that P cross-examined W. Now he's referring to himself in the third person, and P for Perturabo, and W for Rose. It was probably on this day that P cross-examined W about Horus. Only the striking character for identification of the god surely would have made him trouble to obey her. He remembers that he only agreed to obey her in order to show her how silly she was, and he taunted her that nothing could happen if you broke all the rules. Here, therefore, we inserted a short note by Frater P. how W knew Rahur Kuit. She identified him like this. 1. force and fire. I ask her to describe his moral qualities. Deep blue light. I ask her to describe the conditions caused by him. This light is quite unmistakable and unique, but of course her words, though a fair description of it, might equally apply to some other. I ask her to pick out his name from a list of 10 dashed off haphazard. Horus. Recognized his figure when shown. This refers to the striking scene in the Bulak Museum, which will be dealt with in detail. Knew my past relationship with the god. This means, I think, that she knew I had taken his place in the temple. Now, Crowley, playing the officer of Horus, in the Golden Dawn ritual, is the officer that sort of confronts the candidate. He's the bad cop in the good cop, bad cop partnership of Hegemon and Horus. And every equinox, the officers move up a chair. And Crowley had taken the place of Horus in one of the equinox ceremonies. But I digress. And she knew that I had never once invoked him. Knew his enemy. I asked, who is his enemy? And she replied, forces of the waters of the Nile. Now, W knew no Egyptology or anything else. Knew his lineal figure and its color. That's a 1 in 84 chance she could have guessed that. Knew his place in the temple, a 1 in 4 chance at least. Knew his weapon from a list of 6. Knew his primary nature from a list of 7 planets. Knew his number from a list of 10 units. Picked him out of 5 indifferent arbitrary symbols, and then again out of 3 indifferent and arbitrary symbols. This means that I settled in my own mind that D of A, B, C, D, and E should represent him, and that she said D, that kind of test. We cannot too strongly insist that the extraordinary character of this identification. We made no pretension to clairvoyance, nor had P ever tried to train her. P had great experience with clairvoyance, and it was always a point of honor with him to bowl them out. And here was a novice, a woman who should never have been allowed outside a ballroom, speaking with the authority of God and proving it by unhesitating correctness. One slip and Frater P would have sent her to the devil, and that slip was not made. Calculate the odds. We cannot find a mathematical expression for tests 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, but the other 7 tests give us 1 out of 21,168,000. 21 million to 1 against her getting through half the ordeal. Even if we suppose what is absurd, that she knew the correspondences of the Kabbalah as well as Frater P, which she didn't, and had knowledge of his own secret relations with the unseen, we must strain telepathy to explain test number 12. Note, we may add too that Frater P thinks, but it is not quite certain, that he also tested her with the Hebrew alphabet and the tarot trumps, in which case the long odds must be further multiplied by 484, bringing them over the billion mark. But we know that she was perfectly ignorant of the subtle correspondences which were only existing that time in Frater P's own brain. And even if it were so, how could we explain what followed the discovery of the Stele of Revealing? To apply test 4, which was test 4 was recognize his figure when shown. Now he tested, this is all before she went to the museum. They went to the museum, which was probably today. To apply test 4, Frater P took her to the museum at Bolak, which had not been previously visited. She passed by, as P loaded with silent glee, she passed by several images of Horus. They went upstairs. A glass case stood in the distance, too far off for its contents to be recognized. But W recognized it. There, she cried. There he is. P advanced to the case. There was the image of Horus in the form of Rahur Kuit, painted upon a wooden stele of the 26th dynasty. And the exhibit bore the number 666. And after that, it was 5 years before Frater P was forced to obedience. And this incident must have occurred before the 23rd of March. Indeed, if we look at everything else, it pretty much had to have happened on the 18th or 19th. Here's P's description of the stele. In the museum, Cairo number 666, the stele of the priest Ankafna Kansu. Horus has a red disc and a green uraeus. His face is green, his skin is indigo. Let's see. His necklace, anklets, and bracelets are gold. His tunic is a leopard skin, and his apron green and gold. Green is the wand of double power. His right hand is empty. His throne is indigo. The Gonmun, let's see, the Gonmun his throne is indigo the Gonmun. That must be the big part of his ass there he's sitting on. And the red the square. The light, or the background, is gamboge. Above him are the winged globe and the bent figure of the heavenly Isis, her hands and feet touching earth. Okay. And that's where we're going to leave it today. He gives the translation of the stele, which I did just a couple of weeks ago. I translated that. Tomorrow we move on. Tomorrow is March 19th. There's other things for us to talk about on March 19th. Well, anyway, go grab your colored powder and celebrate spring with joy, beauty, laughter, and pinch the girl's cheeks.
Like you used to in high school.
Constance says that's what I used to do in high school. But you enjoyed it, didn't you, dear?
I think I escaped.
She escaped. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't do it to anybody else either.
Just everybody in the hallway.
Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is law, love under will.